Elena Voss felt the cold before she understood why. She was standing in the great hall of the Crosspack, her hands folded over her stomach, when the doors opened, and 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her at once. Damien stood at the far end of the room, on the raised platform where he always stood when he spoke as Alpha. But he was not looking at her the way a mate should look at the woman carrying his child. He was looking at her the way a judge looks at someone already found guilty. "Elena Voss," he said, and his voice carried through the hall like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. "You stand accused of betraying this pack." For a moment, Elena thought she had misheard him. She looked around the hall, searching for a friendly face, someone who might explain that this was some strange misunderstanding that would be cleared up in a minute. But the faces around her were closed, careful, unwilling to meet her eyes, and there, near the front, stood Celine, arms crossed, a small and satisfied smile resting on her lips. "Betrayal?" Elena said, and her voice shook despite her effort to keep it steady. "Damien, what are you talking about?" "I have done nothing." "You were seen," Damien said, "meeting with a rival pack's scout at the eastern border 3 nights ago. You gave him information about our patrol routes." Elena's mind raced backward through the last several days, searching for anything that could explain such an accusation. She had gone walking near the eastern border, yes, because the quiet of the forest helped calm the nausea of early pregnancy. But she had spoken to no one. She had seen no scout. Whatever Damien believed had happened, it had not happened the way he described it. "That is not true," she said. "Damien, look at me. You know me. You know I would never do such a thing." But Damien's jaw was tight, and his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at her with such warmth, now seemed carved from stone. "I have a witness," he said. "Who?" Elena demanded. "Bring them forward. Let them say it to my face." Celine stepped forward before anyone else could speak, her expression arranged into something that resembled sorrow, though Elena could see the satisfaction hiding just beneath it. "I saw her, Damien," Celine said softly, as if the words pained her to speak. "I did not want to believe it either, but I saw her with my own eyes." Elena stared at Celine, and understanding began to dawn, cold and sickening. Celine had loved Damien once, before Elena had come into his life. Celine had never forgiven her for it. This was not justice. This was revenge, dressed up as loyalty. "She is lying," Elena said, turning back to Damien, her hands trembling now. "Damien, please. I am carrying our child. Would I truly risk everything, risk our baby, to betray my own pack? Think about what you are saying." For one brief moment, something flickered across Damien's face, something that looked almost like doubt. Elena held her breath, hoping, praying that he would see through the lie, that the man who had promised to protect her would remember who she truly was. But then his council members began to murmur around him, voices rising, words like traitor and danger and cannot be trusted, passing from mouth to mouth like a spreading fire. And Damien's expression hardened again, the doubt buried beneath the weight of pressure from the men who advised him. "The council has spoken," Damien said, and though his voice wavered slightly, he did not stop. "You will leave this territory tonight. You are no longer welcome here." The words landed like physical blows, one after another, each one stealing a little more air from Elena's lungs. "Damien, no," she whispered. "You cannot mean this. Our child." "The child will remain the concern of this pack," Damien said, though even as he spoke the words, he could not quite look at her. "But you, Elena, are exiled, effective immediately." A ripple of shock moved through the hall, but no one stepped forward to object. No one dared challenge an Alpha's decision, not even one made in haste, not even one built on a lie. Elena looked from face to face one final time, searching for even a single ally, a single voice of reason. She found none. The pack she had loved, the family she had chosen, stood silent and complicit while her whole life collapsed around her. "You are making a mistake," Elena said, and her voice, though breaking, carried a quiet strength that surprised even her. "One day you will know the truth, Damien, and I hope you can live with what you did today." She turned and walked toward the doors, her spine straight even as her heart shattered inside her chest. No one moved to help her. No one moved to stop her. She stepped out into the night air, and the great doors of the hall closed behind her, with a sound like a final verdict. Outside, the cold hit her fully now, the wind moving through the trees with a low, mournful sound. Elena stood on the steps of the hall for a long moment, waiting, some small and foolish part of her still hoping that Damien would come running after her, that he would say it had all been a terrible mistake, that he loved her, and would never truly let her go. But the doors remained closed. No one came. She placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the small, steady warmth of the life growing there, and something inside her shifted from grief into resolve. Whatever happened next, she would protect this child. She would find a way to survive, even if the world she had once trusted had turned its back on her completely. Elena made her way down from the hall and through the sleeping village, past homes she had visited 100 times, past neighbors who now would not even glance out their windows to acknowledge her passing. Word traveled fast among wolves, and by the time she reached the edge of the territory, she understood that everyone already knew. No one offered her shelter for the night. No one offered so much as a warm cloak against the cold. She was, in every sense that mattered, already gone from their world. At the boundary line, marked by a row of ancient stones half buried in moss, Elena paused and looked back one final time, at the only home she had known since becoming Damien's mate. The lights of the village glowed faintly in the distance, warm and golden, and utterly out of reach now. She thought of the nights she and Damien had spent planning names for their child, the mornings he had pressed his hand gently against her stomach, and smiled in a way that had made her believe, truly believe, that they would build a life together that nothing could break. All of it had been an illusion, apparently. Or perhaps it had been real once, and had simply not been strong enough to survive the poison of a jealous rival, and a council too fearful to challenge its own alpha. Elena stepped past the boundary stones and into the unclaimed wilderness beyond. The forest here was darker, wilder, unmarked by any pack's protection. She had heard stories of this land, whispered warnings meant to keep young wolves from wandering too far from the safety of the territory, stories of creatures far older and far more dangerous than wolves, creatures that had ruled these mountains long before any pack had claimed the valleys below. She did not know where she would go. She had no map, no plan, no supplies beyond the clothes on her back. All she had was the certainty that she could not stay, and the fierce, unshakable determination to keep walking as long as her legs would carry her, for the sake of the child she carried. The night deepened around her as she walked. The moon rose high above the treetops, casting pale light through the branches, and the forest filled with sounds that made her pulse quicken. She was not accustomed to being alone in unclaimed land. As a member of a pack, she had always had the safety of numbers, the comfort of familiar scents marking safe paths through the trees. Now every sound seemed like a threat, every shifting shadow like a warning. She walked for hours, her body growing heavier with each mile, exhaustion and grief working together to drain what little strength she had left. The nausea that had plagued her these past weeks returned with a vengeance, and more than once she had to stop and lean against a tree, breathing slowly until the wave of sickness passed. She thought of turning back, of begging for mercy at the boundary line, but she knew there would be no mercy waiting for her there. Damien had made his choice. The pack had made its choice. There was nothing left behind her but a closed door. As the night wore on, the terrain began to rise, the flat forest floor giving way to rocky slopes and steep inclines that made walking increasingly difficult. Elena's feet ached inside her thin shoes, unsuited for mountain travel, and her legs trembled with the effort of the climb. Still, she pushed forward, some instinct telling her that shelter, or at least safety from the open forest floor, might be found higher up among the rocks. She thought of her mother, long past, who used to tell her that wolves were built to endure, that their bodies carried a strength deeper than muscle, a strength born of will and stubbornness and love. Elena repeated those words to herself now, over and over, like a prayer, as she forced one foot in front of the other. Somewhere in the depths of the night, exhaustion finally began to win the battle her will had been fighting. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her breathing grew shallow and quick. She stumbled once, twice, catching herself against the rough bark of a tree, and she knew, with a dull and distant kind of clarity, that her body was reaching its limits. She thought of the child inside her, and fear sharper than anything she had felt in the great hall gripped her heart. She could not fail. She could not let exhaustion or grief, or the cold night air take from her the one thing that still mattered, the one piece of hope that remained after everything else had been stripped away. But her body did not listen to the desperate pleading of her mind. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she sank down onto the cold ground at the base of a great stone outcropping, the mountain looming dark and silent above her. She tried to rise again, tried to force herself back onto her feet, but the strength simply was not there. The world around her began to spin, the trees blurring into shapeless shadows, the sound of the wind fading into a dull roar in her ears. Elena's last coherent thought, before darkness closed in around her, was not of Damien, or of Celine, or of the pack that had cast her out. It was of the small life inside her, and a silent, desperate promise that she would find a way to protect it, even if her own strength had already run out. The mountain wind moved through the trees above her, carrying with it a scent that did not belong to any wolf, a scent ancient and powerful, something that had claimed these peaks long before the pack had ever drawn its boundary lines. Somewhere far above, unseen in the darkness, something stirred, drawn by the faint and fading heartbeat of the woman, collapsed among the stones. Elena did not see it come. She did not feel the moment when clawed hands, careful despite their strength, lifted her from the cold ground. She knew nothing more that night, lost entirely to the darkness, unaware that her desperate flight through the wilderness had led her, by chance or by fate, directly into the path of something that would change the entire course of her life. The last sound she registered, faint and distant, was a low and rumbling growl, not of anger, but of something closer to concern. And then there was nothing at all, only silence, only darkness, only the long and uncertain night stretching endlessly ahead. Warmth. That was the first thing Elena became aware of, a deep and steady warmth that seemed to come from everywhere at once, wrapping around her like something solid. For a long moment, she did not open her eyes, afraid that the warmth was only a dream, that she would wake to find herself still lying on the cold mountain ground, the cruel night still stretching endlessly around her. But the warmth remained, and slowly, other sensations began to return. The softness of a bed beneath her, the distant crackle of a fire, the low murmur of voices somewhere nearby, too quiet for her to make out the words. Elena's eyes fluttered open, and she found herself staring up at a ceiling of dark, polished stone, carved in patterns she did not recognize, unlike anything she had ever seen within her old pack's territory. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways that reminded her of the long, desperate walk through the wilderness. Her hand went immediately to her stomach, and relief flooded through her when she felt the familiar warmth there, the quiet reassurance that the child within her was still safe. Whatever had happened, whoever had found her, they had not harmed her child. The room around her was unlike any she had ever seen. The walls were made of dark stone, smooth and cool, lit by torches that burned with an unusual steady flame. Heavy tapestries hung along one wall, depicting images of great winged creatures soaring above mountain peaks. Elena's breath caught as understanding began to dawn. She was not in wolf territory anymore. A soft knock sounded at the door, and before Elena could respond, it opened to reveal a woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a simple braid. "You are awake," the woman said, her voice gentle. "That is good. You gave us quite a scare." "Where am I?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "You are safe," the woman said, stepping into the room and setting down a tray of food on the table beside the bed. "That is the only thing that matters right now." "My name is Mira. I am one of the healers here." "Here, being," Elena prompted, still trying to piece together her surroundings. Mira hesitated, glancing toward the door as if uncertain how much she should share. "You are in the territory of the Ashrin clan," she said finally. "You were found in the mountains, nearly 2 days' walk from any wolf pack's land. Our alpha brought you here himself." Elena's mind spun. The Ashrin clan. She had heard the name before, whispered in cautionary tales told to young pups to keep them from wandering too far into the mountains. The Dragon clan, a group so old and so powerful that even the fiercest wolf packs gave their territory a wide and respectful distance. "Your alpha," Elena repeated slowly. "He found me?" "He did," Mira said. "You were unconscious, deep in exhaustion, dangerously close to losing both yourself and your child to the cold. Another few hours out there, and I am not certain either of you would have survived." The weight of that statement settled heavily over Elena. She thought of the mountain, the darkness, the moment her legs had finally given out beneath her. She had truly believed, in that final moment, that everything was over. And yet here she was, alive, warm, and safe, in the territory of a clan she had been raised to fear. "Why would your alpha help me?" Elena asked. "A wolf, in dragon territory. Surely that goes against everything your clan stands for." Mira's expression softened into something almost sympathetic. "Cade does not think the way most alphas think," she said. "He saw someone in need. That was enough for him." Elena absorbed this information slowly, uncertain what to make of it. In her experience, alphas acted according to politics, according to strategy, according to what would benefit their own pack or clan. An act of pure, unselfish rescue seemed almost impossible to believe. "I should not stay here," Elena said, though even as she spoke the words, she felt the weakness still lingering in her limbs, the exhaustion that had not yet fully released its grip on her body. "I do not wish to bring trouble to your clan." "You are in no condition to travel," Mira said firmly, though not unkindly. "And even if you were, where would you go? You told us, in your delirium during the first night, some of what happened to you. Your own pack cast you out. There is no home waiting for you to return to." The words stung, though Elena knew they were true. She lowered her eyes, unable to argue against the simple, painful reality of her situation. She had nowhere else to go. No pack would take in a wolf exiled for supposed betrayal, regardless of whether the accusation had been true. And she could not survive alone in the wilderness. Not in her condition, not without shelter or supplies. "Rest," Mira said gently, noticing the exhaustion returning to Elena's face. "Eat something. There will be time to decide what comes next once you have regained your strength." Elena nodded, too tired to protest further, and allowed Mira to help her settle back against the pillows. As the healer moved about the room, gathering supplies and checking on the small collection of herbs steeping near the fire, Elena found her thoughts drifting toward the mysterious alpha who had found her, who had carried her from the mountainside without knowing anything about her, without any obligation to help a wolf who was not even part of his own people. She wondered what kind of man made such a choice. In her experience, kindness without expectation of return was a rare thing indeed, especially among leaders who carried the weight of protecting an entire clan. Perhaps Mira was simply being generous in her description of him. Perhaps there was more to this rescue than pure kindness, some strategic advantage Elena had not yet uncovered. Or perhaps, and this thought unsettled her more than she expected, perhaps the dragon clan truly did operate by different rules than the wolves she had known her entire life. Over the following days, Elena's strength slowly returned. Mira visited regularly, bringing food and checking on both Elena and the child growing within her. Elena learned, through careful and cautious conversation, small pieces about the clan that had taken her in. The Ashran territory sat deep within the mountains, far from the reach of most wolf packs, protected as much by its remote location as by the strength of its people. The clan itself was smaller than most wolf packs Elena had known, close-knit, fiercely loyal to one another, and led by an alpha who, according to Mira, rarely left his own territory and rarely involved himself in the affairs of other creatures, which made his decision to rescue her all the more curious. On the fourth day, Elena finally felt strong enough to leave her bed and explore, at Mira's encouragement, a little of the space beyond her room. She dressed in clothes that had been left for her, simple but well-made, and made her way slowly down a stone corridor, lit by the same steady torches she had seen in her room. The corridor opened into a wide hall, larger than any room she had seen within her own pack's territory, its high ceiling supported by massive stone pillars carved with images she did not fully understand. Sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily through the air. Elena paused at the threshold, taking in the quiet grandeur of the space, and it was there, standing near one of the tall windows with his back to her, that she saw him for the first time since waking. He was tall, taller than most wolves she had known, his shoulders broad and his posture carrying an easy, quiet strength that did not need to announce itself. His dark hair was cut short, practical rather than styled for appearance, and even from behind, something about the way he stood, still and watchful, told Elena that this was a man who noticed everything around him. As if sensing her presence, he turned, and Elena found herself looking into eyes the color of amber, striking and unfamiliar, nothing like the eyes of any wolf she had ever known. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, each simply taking the measure of the other. "You are awake," he said finally, his voice low and even. "Mira told me you were recovering well." "You are the one who found me," Elena said. It was not quite a question, though she wanted confirmation nonetheless. "I am," he said simply. "Cade Ashrin." "Elena Voss," she replied, and found herself studying his face carefully, searching for some hint of expectation, some sign of the price he might demand for his kindness. She found none. His expression remained calm, patient, entirely without the calculating edge she had grown accustomed to seeing in the eyes of alphas. "Thank you," she said finally, the words feeling inadequate against the weight of what he had done for her, "for finding me, for saving my life, and my child's life. I do not know how I can ever repay such a debt." Cade studied her for a long moment before responding. "You owe me nothing," he said. "I did what needed to be done. Nothing more." "Most alphas would expect something in return," Elena said carefully, unable to fully release her guarded caution. "Loyalty, information, some form of payment." Something flickered across Cade's expression, something that might have been the faintest trace of amusement, though it vanished quickly. "I am not most alphas," he said, "and you are not my prisoner, nor my debtor. You are welcome to remain here as long as you need, and you are equally welcome to leave whenever you choose. That choice belongs to you." Elena had no response ready for such an offer, so unlike anything she had expected. She simply stood there, in the quiet grandeur of that stone hall, studying the face of a man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return, and felt, for the first time since the doors of her old Pax Hall had closed behind her, a small and cautious flicker of something that almost resembled hope. Weeks passed, and Elena remained within the walls of the Ashrin stronghold, though not because she felt trapped there. Each morning, she woke expecting to feel the familiar pull of homesickness, the ache of missing a place and people who had once felt like family. Instead, she found herself waking with something closer to curiosity, wondering what small discoveries the day might bring in this place, so different from anything she had known. The Dragon Clan operated differently than her old pack in nearly every way she could observe. Where wolves organized themselves around strict hierarchies, every member knowing their place and rank within the pack structure, the Ashrin clan seemed built on something looser, something that valued individual skill and contribution over rigid tradition. Elena watched as clan members moved freely between roles, a warrior helping tend the gardens one day, a healer assisting with construction the next. No one seemed confined to a single identity. She spent her mornings with Mira, learning about the herbs the healer used to treat various ailments, and found herself surprised by how much she enjoyed the quiet, careful work of grinding roots and mixing tinctures. It reminded her, in some strange way, of the person she had been before becoming Damien's mate, before her entire identity had folded itself around the role of Alpha's partner. She had once loved learning new things simply for the joy of it, and here, in this unfamiliar place, that old part of herself began to stir back to life. In the afternoons, she often found herself wandering the grounds of the stronghold, watching the daily rhythms of clan life with growing fascination. Children ran freely through courtyards, their laughter echoing off stone walls, watched over not just by their own parents but by whichever adults happened to be nearby. Elena thought of the more formal, careful way children had been raised within her old pack, always monitored, always trained early toward their eventual roles, and wondered which approach truly served young ones better. It was during one of these afternoon walks that she encountered Cade again, this time in the training yard where several clan members sparred beneath his watchful supervision. Elena paused at the edge of the yard, intending simply to observe from a respectful distance, but Cade noticed her presence almost immediately and called a brief halt to the training. "Elena," he said, approaching her with the same calm, measured energy she had noticed in every interaction with him. "You are looking stronger." "I feel stronger," she admitted. "Mira has been taking excellent care of me, and the child seems to be thriving, despite everything." Something softened in Cade's expression at the mention of the child, though he said nothing further on the subject, respecting, as he always seemed to, the boundaries of what was and was not his place to comment on. Instead, he gestured toward the training yard behind him. "Would you like to sit and watch, if you have the time?" he asked. "I find the afternoon sun pleasant here, and the company would not go unwelcome." Elena accepted, settling onto a low stone bench at the edge of the yard, while Cade returned to overseeing the training session. She watched with growing interest as clan members practiced combat forms unlike anything she had seen among wolves, movements that seemed to draw as much from patience and precision as from raw strength. There was an elegance to it, a discipline that reminded her, in its own way, of the healing work she had been learning from Mira. When the session ended, Cade returned to sit beside her, close enough for easy conversation, but respectful of the distance between them. "You seem thoughtful today," he observed. "I have been thinking about my old life," Elena admitted, surprising herself with her own honesty. She had not intended to share such personal reflections, but something about Cade's quiet, unhurried presence made honesty feel easier than she expected. "About how different things are here." "Different in what way?" Cade asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. "Everything felt so rigid there," Elena said slowly, working through her thoughts as she spoke them aloud for the first time. Every wolf had a place, a rank, a role they were expected to fulfill without question. I spent so many years fitting myself into the shape of what was expected of me, that I nearly forgot there were other shapes I could take. Cade considered this for a long moment before responding. "Structure has its value," he said. "My clan is not without its own order, its own expectations. But I have always believed that strength comes as much from individual purpose as from collective discipline. A person who understands their own worth serves their community better than one who has simply been told their place within it." Elena studied him as he spoke, struck once again by how different his philosophy seemed from everything Damien had ever expressed about leadership. Damien had spoken often of duty, of sacrifice, of the individual bending to serve the pack's greater good. Cade spoke instead of purpose, of worth, of strength built from within rather than imposed from above. "You truly believe that?" Elena said, not quite a question. "I have seen it proven true, time and again," Cade replied. "The strongest members of my clan are not the ones who simply follow orders without thought. They are the ones who understand why they fight, why they build, why they protect what matters to them. That understanding cannot be commanded into existence. It must be discovered." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while after that, watching the late afternoon light shift across the training yard, and Elena found herself thinking, not for the first time, about how strange it was that she felt more at ease in this unfamiliar place, among a people she had been raised to fear, than she had felt in her final months within her own pack. As the days continued to pass, these quiet moments between Elena and Cade became more frequent, though never planned, never forced. They would find themselves crossing paths during the afternoon, sharing a meal in comfortable conversation, walking together along the stone paths that wound through the stronghold's gardens. Elena learned that Cade had led his clan since a young age, following the loss of his own parents in circumstances he did not elaborate on, and that he carried the weight of that early responsibility with a quiet gravity that spoke of both strength and loneliness. She learned, too, that despite his position as alpha, Cade rarely commanded when he could instead persuade, rarely demanded when he could instead explain. His clan followed him not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine respect, a respect Elena found herself, almost against her will, beginning to share. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountain peaks and painted the sky in shades of deep orange and violet, Elena found Cade standing alone, near the edge of the stronghold's outer wall, looking out over the valley below. She approached quietly, uncertain whether she was intruding on a private moment, but he glanced back and offered a small, welcoming nod that invited her to join him. "It is beautiful here," Elena said, coming to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him against the cooling evening air. "I have always thought so," Cade agreed, "though I confess, the view has felt somewhat different since you arrived." Elena glanced at him, surprised by the quiet honesty in his tone. Different how? Cade was quiet for a moment, his gaze still fixed on the valley below, though Elena sensed his attention had shifted entirely to the conversation between them. "I have led this clan for many years," he said finally, "and in all that time, I have kept myself apart from most personal attachments. It seemed simpler that way, safer, perhaps, for both myself and those I might have grown close to." "And now?" Elena asked softly, her heart beginning to beat a little faster despite herself. "Now," Cade said, turning to face her fully, his amber eyes catching the last light of the setting sun. I find myself less certain that simplicity was ever truly what I wanted. Elena held his gaze, feeling something shift between them, something warm and fragile, and entirely unexpected. She thought of Damien, of the betrayal that had brought her to this place, and braced herself instinctively against the vulnerability of trusting anyone again so completely. But standing there, in the fading light, watching the sincerity in Cade's expression, she found that instinct slowly loosening its grip. I am not certain I am ready for anything more than what we already have, Elena admitted honestly. My heart is still healing from wounds that have not yet closed. I understand, Cade said, and there was no disappointment in his voice, only patience, only genuine acceptance of her honesty. I am not asking for anything more than you are ready to give, Elena. I only wanted you to know that whatever this is between us, I do not take it lightly. Elena felt tears prick unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes, moved by the simple, unguarded honesty of his words. It had been so long since anyone had offered her patience rather than expectation, understanding rather than demand. She reached out, almost without thinking, and placed her hand gently over his, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palm. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for finding me, for giving me a place to heal, for not asking for more than I can give. Cade turned his hand beneath hers, gently threading his fingers through her own, and together they stood at the edge of the wall, watching the last light fade from the sky. Two people, who had each carried their own burdens of solitude, finding, unexpectedly, a shared moment of quiet connection amid the vast and ancient mountains. As Elena's pregnancy advanced, the quiet rhythms of clan life continued to offer her a stability she had not expected to find in dragon territory. Mira monitored her progress carefully, noting with quiet satisfaction that both Elena and her unborn child seemed to be thriving, despite the trauma of her exile. The nausea that had plagued her earlier months had faded, replaced by a steady, growing energy that Elena welcomed after so many weeks of exhaustion and grief. She had begun, gradually, to feel less like a guest within the stronghold, and more like a genuine part of its daily life. Clan members who had once regarded her with cautious curiosity now greeted her by name, some even seeking her out for the small comforts of conversation during the quiet hours of the afternoon. A young healer named Corin, who worked closely alongside Mira, had become something of a friend, teasing Elena gently about her growing appetite for the spiced honey cakes that the kitchen prepared each week. You will make yourself sick eating so many of those, Corin said one afternoon, watching with amusement as Elena reached for a second cake from the tray Mira had left cooling on the windowsill. The child demands it, Elena replied, feigning solemn seriousness. I am merely a vessel for its cravings. Corin laughed, a warm and genuine sound that had become one of the small joys of Elena's days. A very convenient excuse, she said, though I suppose I cannot argue with a growing life. These small moments of friendship and laughter had done more to heal Elena's spirit than she ever could have expected. She thought, sometimes late at night as she lay awake feeling the child shift and move within her, about how strange it was that the pack she had once considered her entire world now felt like a distant memory, while this place, so foreign in its customs and traditions, had become something close to home. Her relationship with Cade continued to deepen as well, though slowly, carefully, both of them respectful of the wounds Elena still carried from her betrayal. He never pressed her for more than she was ready to give, never demanded declarations or promises she was not yet prepared to make. Instead, he simply remained present, steady and patient, a quiet source of comfort that asked nothing in return. Their evenings together became a cherished ritual. After the day's work was finished, they would often meet near the stronghold's gardens, sharing simple meals and quiet conversation as the stars emerged overhead. Elena found herself telling Cade things she had never shared with anyone, memories of her childhood, fears about motherhood, uncertainties about the future that stretched ahead of her, unknown and unformed. Do you ever think about what comes next? Elena asked one evening, as they sat together beneath the wide, star-scattered sky. After the child is born, what happens to us then? Cade considered the question thoughtfully before responding, as he always did, weighing his words with the same careful deliberation he brought to matters of clan leadership. I think, he said slowly, that the future is built one honest choice at a time. I do not wish to rush you toward decisions you are not ready to make, Elena. But I will say this. You and your child are welcome here, for as long as you wish to stay, regardless of what happens between us personally. That is a generous offer, Elena said softly. It is not generosity, Cade replied. It is simply the truth. You belong here now, whether or not you choose to build something more with me. Elena felt the familiar warmth of gratitude and something deeper, something she was not yet ready to name, spreading through her chest. She had spent so many years within her old pack believing that her worth was tied entirely to her role as Damien's mate, that without that role, she would have nothing, would be no one. Cade's quiet insistence that she belonged, regardless of any romantic connection between them, offered her a kind of freedom she had never known she needed. As the weeks continued to pass, Elena found herself growing more confident, more secure in her place within the clan. She began assisting Mira and Corin more regularly in the healing quarters, learning not just the practical skills of herbcraft and wound treatment, but something deeper as well, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with her status as anyone's mate or anyone's exile. She was simply Elena, learning, growing, contributing to the community that had welcomed her. One afternoon, as she worked alongside Mira grinding dried roots into fine powder for a healing salve, the older woman glanced at her with a thoughtful expression. You have changed since you first arrived here, Mira observed. Have I? Elena asked, genuinely curious. You carry yourself differently, Mira said. When you first came to us, you moved like someone constantly bracing for the next blow, always watchful, always guarded. Now you move like someone who has found solid ground beneath her feet. Elena considered this observation carefully, recognizing the truth in it even as she examined her own feelings. I suppose I have found something here I did not expect to find, she admitted. A place where I am valued simply for who I am, rather than for the role I fill. Mira smiled warmly, continuing her work without further comment, though Elena sensed a quiet approval in the healer's expression, as if she had witnessed this particular transformation many times before and recognized its significance. That evening, as the sun began its slow descent behind the mountain peaks, Elena made her way to the garden, where she knew Cade would be waiting, as he always was, patient and steady, ready to share the quiet hours of the evening with her. She found him standing near the fountain at the garden's center, his attention fixed on the water as it cascaded gently over smooth stones. You seem deep in thought, Elena observed, coming to stand beside him. I received word today, Cade said, his expression more serious than usual, of movement near our northern border. Wolf scouts, from what my patrols could determine. Elena's heart quickened, an old fear resurfacing, despite the months of peace she had known within these walls. From my old pack? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. It is difficult to say with certainty, Cade replied. But the timing seems significant. Word may be spreading of your survival, Elena, perhaps even of the child. Elena wrapped her arms protectively around her rounded stomach, an old instinct resurfacing despite the safety she had found within this territory. What does this mean for us? She asked, unable to keep a slight tremor from her voice. Cade turned to face her fully, his amber eyes steady and reassuring, despite the gravity of the news he carried. It means we remain vigilant, he said. But it does not mean you are in immediate danger, Elena. This territory is well protected, and I will not allow harm to come to you or your child, regardless of who comes seeking either of you. His words, spoken with such quiet, unwavering conviction, did much to steady Elena's racing heart. She had grown accustomed over these past months to trusting in Cade's strength and steadiness, and even now, faced with the unsettling possibility that her old pack might be searching for her, she found herself believing, fully and completely, in his promise of protection. Thank you, she said softly, moving closer to him, seeking the comfort of his presence against the sudden chill of uncertainty that had settled over her. Cade wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders, and together they stood beside the fountain, watching the last light of day fade slowly into the deepening twilight, both aware that whatever peace they had found together might soon be tested by forces neither of them could fully control. The final weeks of Elena's pregnancy arrived with a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. The news of wolf scouts near the northern border had not been repeated, and as days turned into weeks without further sign of trouble, the tension that had gripped the stronghold began to ease, though Cade maintained a careful watch over the territory nonetheless, unwilling to let his guard drop entirely. Elena spent these final weeks in quiet preparation, working alongside Mira to gather the supplies and herbs that would be needed for the birth. Despite her growing anticipation, a current of fear ran beneath her excitement. Memories of the Great Hall, of Damien's cold judgment, of the sudden and complete collapse of everything she had once believed to be certain in her life. She wondered, sometimes late at night, what kind of world she was bringing her child into. What challenges still lay ahead that she could not yet foresee. Cade remained a constant, steady presence throughout these final weeks, his attentiveness never wavering despite the demands of leading his clan. He often found small moments throughout the day to check on her, to ensure she had everything she needed, to simply sit with her in comfortable silence when words felt unnecessary. Elena found herself relying on his steadiness more than she had expected, drawing strength from his calm presence during moments when her own courage threatened to falter. "You do not have to worry about everything alone anymore," Cade told her one evening, as they sat together in the quiet of her room, the fire crackling gently in the hearth. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Elena studied his face in the firelight, moved once again by the quiet sincerity that seemed to define everything about him. "I have spent so long believing I had to carry every burden myself," she admitted. "It is strange, learning to share that weight with someone else." "Strange, but perhaps not unwelcome?" Cade asked, a small smile touching his lips. "Not unwelcome at all," Elena agreed softly, reaching out to take his hand in hers. As the days continued to pass, Elena found herself growing increasingly aware of the depth of feeling that had developed between them. What had begun as gratitude, and grown slowly into friendship, had transformed gradually into something far more significant, something Elena could no longer deny even to herself. She loved him, not in the desperate, consuming way she had once believed herself to love Damien, but in a quieter, steadier way, built on genuine respect, patience, and the simple comfort of being fully known and fully accepted. She had not yet spoken these feelings aloud, uncertain whether the timing was right, whether her heart, still bearing the scars of Damien's betrayal, was truly ready to offer itself so completely to someone new. But she suspected, from the tenderness in Cade's eyes whenever he looked at her, from the careful patience he had shown throughout these many months, that he understood her hesitation and respected it without complaint. One particularly clear evening, as the first hints of labor began to stir within her, Elena found herself unable to sleep, restless with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. She made her way quietly through the stronghold's corridors, drawn instinctively toward the garden where she and Cade had shared so many of their quiet evening conversations. She found him there, as she had somehow known she would, standing near the fountain, his expression thoughtful as he gazed up at the star-scattered sky. He turned as she approached, immediately noting something different in her posture, some subtle shift that spoke of change. "Elena?" he asked, concern coloring his voice. "Is everything all right?" "I think," Elena said, a mixture of nervousness and excitement in her voice, "that it may be time." Cade's expression shifted immediately, concern giving way to focused determination. "I will fetch Mira," he said, already moving toward the door, though he paused briefly to take her hand, pressing a gentle, reassuring kiss against her knuckles. "You are not alone in this, Elena. Whatever happens tonight, I am here." The hours that followed passed in a blur of intensity and effort, Mira and Corin working alongside Elena with calm, practiced efficiency, guiding her through each stage of labor with quiet encouragement and steady hands. Cade remained nearby throughout, though respectful of the healer's guidance, offering his presence and support in whatever way was needed, his steady voice a constant anchor amid the overwhelming intensity of the experience. As dawn began to break over the mountain peaks, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, Elena's child finally entered the world, and the room filled with the sound of a strong, healthy cry. Mira lifted the infant carefully, checking with practiced hands to ensure all was well, before placing the small bundle gently into Elena's exhausted but joyful arms. "A daughter," Mira said softly, her voice warm with emotion, "strong and healthy." Elena looked down at her daughter's small face, overwhelmed by a wave of love so profound it nearly stole the breath from her lungs. The child's eyes, when they finally opened, held a striking amber color, unlike Elena's own, unlike Damien's either, something entirely unique to this new and precious life. She is beautiful, Cade said softly, coming to stand beside the bed, his expression filled with a tenderness that touched Elena deeply despite her exhaustion. Would you like to hold her? Elena asked, extending the small bundle toward him. Cade's expression shifted briefly into something like surprise, though he accepted the offer without hesitation, cradling the infant with a gentleness that seemed almost incongruous with his considerable strength. He studied the child's face for a long moment, something unreadable passing across his own features. She has quite a grip already, he observed, as tiny fingers curled instinctively around one of his own. Elena watched this quiet moment between them, with a warmth that spread through her entire chest, recognizing, perhaps for the first time with complete clarity, the depth of the bond that had formed between herself, her daughter, and the man who had saved them both from almost certain death on that cold mountainside so many months before. I have been thinking of names, Elena said softly, watching as her daughter's small hand continued to grip Cade's finger. I would like to call her Ivy. It felt right, somehow, watching her grow these past months, thinking of something resilient, something that finds a way to thrive even in difficult conditions. Ivy, Cade repeated, testing the name aloud, a small smile touching his lips. It suits her. As Mira and Corin quietly withdrew to allow the small family a moment of privacy, Elena found herself studying Cade's face as he continued to hold her daughter, struck by the natural tenderness he displayed, by the quiet devotion that seemed to have taken root within him despite the child not being his own by blood. Thank you, Elena said softly, for everything, for finding us, for giving us a home, for being here tonight. Cade looked up from Ivy's small face, meeting Elena's gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. There is nowhere else I would rather be, he said simply. And in that quiet, honest declaration, Elena felt the last remaining walls around her heart begin, finally, to soften completely. Outside, the sun continued its steady rise over the mountain peaks, casting warm golden light across the stronghold that had become, in every way that truly mattered, Elena's home. Whatever challenges still lay ahead, whatever dangers might yet emerge from the shadows of her past, Elena found herself facing this new chapter of her life with a courage and hope she had not believed herself capable of feeling again, not after the devastating betrayal that had once threatened to break her completely. Ivy grew quickly in the months that followed her birth, her amber eyes bright with curiosity, her small hands reaching constantly for the world around her. Elena watched her daughter's development with a mixture of wonder and quiet vigilance, aware that Ivy seemed, in subtle ways, different from ordinary wolf pups. Her senses appeared sharper than expected for her age, her reactions quicker, her presence somehow more commanding despite her tiny size. Mira noticed these differences as well, though she offered no immediate explanation, simply observing Ivy's growth with the same careful attention she gave to every aspect of clan life. It was Corin, ever direct in her observations, who finally voiced what several members of the clan had begun quietly discussing among themselves. She carries something of the dragon blood, Corin said one afternoon, watching as Ivy, barely able to crawl, seemed to instinctively track the movement of shadows across the nursery floor with unusual precision. I have seen it before, in children born to mixed heritage, though it is rare. Elena felt a flicker of surprise, though not entirely unexpected surprise, given the unusual nature of Ivy's birth and the territory in which she had been conceived and born. How is that possible? She asked. Ivy's father is a wolf. There is no dragon blood in her lineage. Blood is not always so simple, Corin said thoughtfully. The land itself carries power, especially ancient territory like this, steeped in generations of dragon magic. Sometimes that power finds its way into unexpected places, into children born and raised within its influence, regardless of their bloodline. Elena considered this explanation carefully, watching her daughter continue her determined exploration of the nursery floor. Whatever the cause, she felt no fear at the discovery, only a quiet acceptance that her daughter was simply, wonderfully, herself, shaped by circumstances unique to her extraordinary beginning. When she shared Corin's observations with Cade later that evening, he received the news with the same calm acceptance Elena had come to expect from him. It does not surprise me, he said thoughtfully. This land holds ancient power, older than either of our peoples. It seems fitting, in its own way, that a child born here, beneath these mountains, might carry some trace of that power within her. Does it concern you? Elena asked. That she may grow to be different from ordinary wolves, perhaps even different from ordinary dragons? Cade shook his head firmly. It does not concern me in the slightest, he said. Ivy is exactly who she is meant to be, Elena. Whatever gifts she carries, whatever challenges those gifts might eventually bring, she will face them with the strength of both her wolf heritage and whatever connection she has formed with this land. And she will face them surrounded by people who love her, regardless of what she becomes. Elena found comfort in his words, as she so often did, and turned her attention back to watching her daughter continue her energetic exploration of the world around her. Whatever unusual gifts Ivy might eventually develop, Elena felt certain, watching the fierce determination, already evident in her daughter's small movements, that she would grow into someone capable of handling whatever challenges life presented. As the months continued to pass, Elena's role within the clan continued to deepen and expand. She had become, by this point, a genuine and valued member of the healing quarters, working alongside Mira and Corin with growing skill and confidence. She had also, gradually and without ever explicitly discussing it, become something like a partner to Cade in matters of the clan's daily governance, her perspective as an outsider, someone who had experienced firsthand the failures of rigid hierarchical leadership, proving valuable in shaping some of the clan's evolving policies. Their relationship, too, had continued to deepen, moving steadily from the careful patience of early friendship into something more openly acknowledged, more fully embraced by both of them. They had not yet spoken formally of mate bonds or permanent commitment, both aware that such decisions carried weight and significance that deserved careful consideration, but the love between them had become an undeniable, comfortable presence in both their lives, evident in every shared glance, every quiet moment of connection. One evening, as Elena settled Ivy into her crib for the night, humming a soft, wordless melody she had learned from Mira, Cade appeared in the doorway, watching the quiet scene with an expression of such open tenderness that Elena felt her heart swell with emotion. "You look happy," he observed softly, once Ivy had finally drifted into sleep and Elena had joined him in the doorway. "I am happy," Elena said, surprising herself slightly with how easily the words came, how completely she meant them. "I did not think, after everything that happened, that I would ever feel this way again. Safe, valued, loved." "You deserve every bit of that happiness," Cade said, reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "And more, Elena, so much more." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Ivy sleep peacefully in her crib, before Cade spoke again, his voice carrying a new note of seriousness. "I have been thinking," he said carefully, "about our future, about what it might look like, formally, beyond the quiet arrangement we have settled into these past months." Elena's heart quickened, recognizing the significance of the direction this conversation seemed to be heading. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I am thinking," Cade said, turning to face her fully, his amber eyes steady and sincere, "that I would like to formally claim you as my mate, if you are willing. Not out of obligation, not out of any expectation beyond your own genuine feelings, but because I love you, Elena, fully and completely, and I wish for the entire clan, and indeed the entire world beyond these mountains, to know it." Elena felt tears gathering unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes, moved beyond words by the depth of sincerity in his declaration. She thought, briefly, of Damien, of the promises he had once made and so easily broken, and felt a quiet, powerful certainty settle over her that what she had found with Cade was something entirely different, something built on genuine trust and mutual respect, rather than the fragile foundation of expectation and hierarchy. "Yes," she said softly, reaching up to cup his face gently in her hands. "Yes, Cade. I would be honored to become your mate." The joy that spread across his face at her answer was unlike anything Elena had seen from him before, his usual careful composure giving way entirely to open, unguarded happiness. He pulled her close, and for a long moment, they simply held each other, standing together in the quiet doorway of their daughter's nursery, two hearts that had each known significant pain, now finally, fully, committed to building a future together, grounded in honesty and genuine love, rather than fear or obligation. Yet even amid this joyful moment, a quiet awareness lingered at the edges of Elena's mind, a recognition that formalizing their bond would not go unnoticed beyond the borders of the Ashrin territory. Word would eventually reach her old pack, reach Damien himself, that the wolf he had exiled had not only survived, but had found love and belonging within the very dragon clan his people had always regarded with wary suspicion. Whatever peace and happiness she had found here, Elena understood, with quiet but certain instinct, that a reckoning with her past still waited somewhere on the horizon, patient and inevitable. Far from the mountains, within the familiar halls of the Crosspack's territory, Damien sat alone in his private chambers, a cup of untouched tea growing cold on the table beside him. Months had passed since the night he exiled Elena, months during which the initial certainty of his decision had slowly eroded, replaced by a persistent gnawing doubt that refused to leave him in peace. He had tried, in the early weeks following her exile, to convince himself that he had done what duty required, that the evidence against Elena, however painful, had left him no reasonable alternative. But as time passed, small inconsistencies in Celine's account had begun to surface, tiny details that did not quite align, moments of hesitation in her retelling that Damien had initially dismissed, but now found himself unable to ignore. A knock sounded at his door, and Damien looked up to find his second-in-command, a steady and loyal wolf named Colin, standing in the doorway with an expression that immediately put Damien on alert. "What is it?" Damien asked, straightening in his seat. "Reports from our northern scouts," Colin said, stepping into the room. "There have been sightings. A wolf woman living within Ashrin territory, in the Dragon Clan's stronghold, and a child with her, born some months ago." Damien's heart seemed to stop entirely within his chest. "Elena," he said quietly, the name feeling strange and fragile on his tongue after so many months of forcing himself not to speak it. "The scouts could not confirm her identity with absolute certainty," Colin said carefully, "but the description matches, and the timing aligns with when the child would have been born, if she survived," Damien finished, his voice heavy with a complicated mixture of relief and renewed guilt. He had told himself, in his darkest moments over these past months, that perhaps Elena and the child had not survived the harsh wilderness beyond the pack's boundaries, a possibility that had haunted him relentlessly, despite his attempts to bury the thought beneath the weight of duty and necessary leadership. "There is something else," Colin continued, his expression growing more troubled. "One of our younger wolves came to me recently, uncertain whether the information was relevant. He claims he saw Celine meeting privately with a scout from a rival pack, weeks before Elena's exile. A meeting remarkably similar to what Celine claimed she witnessed Elena participating in." Damien felt something cold settle in his stomach, a suspicion he had not allowed himself to fully consider until this moment, crystallizing suddenly into terrible, undeniable clarity. "Are you suggesting," he said slowly, "that Celine lied, that she fabricated the entire accusation against Elena?" "I am suggesting," Colin said carefully, "that the evidence deserves a much closer examination than it originally received." Damien rose from his seat, pacing the length of his chambers, his mind racing through the events of that terrible night months ago, replaying Celine's testimony, her careful, sorrowful expression, the convenient timing of her accusation, just as Elena's pregnancy had become widely known throughout the pack. He thought of the doubt he had felt in that moment, the flicker of uncertainty he had allowed the council's pressure to override, and felt a wave of self-directed anger and shame wash over him. "Bring Celine to me," Damien said, his voice hard with a resolve he had not felt in months. "I want answers, and I want them now." Celine arrived within the hour, her expression carefully composed, though Damien noted, with newly sharpened attention, a slight tension in her posture that he had somehow overlooked during the original accusation. "You wish to see me, Damien?" she asked, her voice carrying its usual warm, sympathetic tone. "I have received reports," Damien said, watching her closely, "that Elena has been located, living within Ashrin territory, along with a child." Something flickered briefly across Celine's expression, gone almost as quickly as it appeared, but Damien had spent enough time studying the subtle expressions of pack politics to recognize genuine alarm when he saw it. "That is surprising news," Celine said carefully. "I had assumed, given the harsh conditions of exile, that she had not survived." "As had I," Damien said, his tone deliberately even, giving nothing away of the suspicion now hardening within him. "I have also received reports of a meeting you had." weeks before Elena's exile, with a scout from a rival pack. A meeting that sounds remarkably similar to the one you accused Elena of participating in. Celine's composure cracked, just slightly, just enough for Damien to see the truth hiding beneath her carefully maintained facade. "Damien, I do not know what you are implying," she said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Whoever gave you this information is clearly mistaken, or perhaps deliberately attempting to sow discord within the pack." "Perhaps," Damien said, though his tone made clear he did not believe this explanation. "Or perhaps you fabricated an accusation against an innocent woman, out of jealousy and resentment over a relationship that ended long before I ever chose Elena as my mate." Celine's expression finally crumbled entirely, the careful mask of sorrowful loyalty giving way to something closer to desperate panic. "Damien, please," she said, her voice rising with sudden urgency. "You must understand. I never intended for things to go so far. I only wanted her gone, wanted things to return to how they were before she arrived. I never meant for it to end in exile, in such danger for her and the child." The confirmation, though not entirely unexpected given the mounting evidence, still struck Damien like a physical blow. He had allowed himself to be manipulated, had allowed his own trust and love for Elena to be twisted into cruelty by someone he had once considered a trusted friend within the pack. The weight of what he had done, the devastating consequences of his hasty judgment, settled over him with crushing, undeniable clarity. "You will answer for this before the full council," Damien said, his voice cold with barely contained fury. "Your fabrication cost an innocent woman her home, her pack, nearly her life, and the life of her child. Such betrayal will not go unanswered." Celine began to protest further, but Damien had already turned away, his mind now fully consumed by a single overwhelming priority. He needed to see Elena. He needed to understand what she had endured, what she had survived, and he needed to find some way, however inadequate it might ultimately prove, to make right the terrible wrong he had allowed to happen. "Colin," he said, turning to his second-in-command, who had remained silently observing the entire exchange. "Prepare a small envoy. We are traveling to Ashran territory." "Damien," Colin said carefully, "the Ashran clan does not typically welcome uninvited visitors, particularly wolves. Approaching their territory without proper diplomatic arrangement could be seen as a significant provocation." "I understand the risk," Damien said, his resolve unwavering, despite the very real danger such an approach might carry. "But I owe Elena the truth, at minimum. I owe her an accounting of what happened, and an opportunity to see justice served against the one who truly betrayed this pack. Whatever risks that requires, I am willing to accept them." Colin studied his alpha's determined expression for a long moment before nodding his agreement, moving to begin preparations for the journey ahead. Damien remained standing alone in his chambers a moment longer, staring out the window toward the distant mountains where, somewhere within the hidden territory of a clan his people had always regarded with cautious respect, Elena and her child, his child, were living a life he knew almost nothing about. Whatever awaited him on that journey, whatever reception he might receive from a woman he had so badly wronged, Damien understood, with quiet but absolute certainty, that he could not continue living beneath the weight of unresolved guilt and unanswered questions. He needed to face what he had done, however painful that reckoning might prove to be, and he needed to do so soon. News of Damien's approaching envoy reached the Ashran stronghold 2 days before their arrival, carried swiftly by border scouts who had spotted the small group of wolves making their careful way through the mountain passes. Cade received the report with a controlled but noticeable tension, immediately calling a meeting with his most trusted advisors to discuss how best to handle the unexpected approach. Elena, when informed of the news, felt a complicated wave of emotions wash over her. Fear and old grief tangled together with something else. Something that felt almost like relief, that a reckoning she had long anticipated might finally be approaching. She held Ivy close as she processed the information, watching her daughter's peaceful, sleeping face, and feeling a fierce protectiveness rise within her. "You do not have to see him, if you do not wish to," Cade said gently, finding her in the nursery later that evening, still holding Ivy, though the child had long since fallen fully asleep. "I can turn his envoy away at the border. You owe him nothing, Elena, not even the courtesy of an audience." "I know," Elena said softly, though even as she spoke the words, she found herself uncertain whether turning Damien away was truly what she wanted. But perhaps I do owe myself something. The chance to finally speak my truth to him directly, to see whatever accounting he has brought with him, rather than always wondering what might have been said. Cade nodded slowly, respecting her decision, despite his own protective instincts urging him toward caution. Then we will receive him, he said. But you will not face this conversation alone, Elena. I will be there beside you, every step of the way. Thank you, Elena said, grateful beyond words, for the steady, unwavering support he continued to offer, so different from the conditional loyalty she had once experienced within her old pack. 2 days later, as the sun climbed toward its midday peak, Damien's small envoy arrived at the outer boundary of Ashran territory, where Cade himself, along with a contingent of his most trusted warriors, waited to receive them. Elena stood a short distance behind, Ivy held securely in her arms, watching as the wolves approached with careful, measured steps, clearly aware of the delicate nature of their unannounced arrival within dragon territory. Damien stepped forward from his small group, and Elena felt her breath catch as she studied his face for the first time in nearly a year. He looked older somehow, the confident bearing she remembered replaced by something more weathered, more burdened. His eyes found hers almost immediately, and she saw, in that first moment of contact, a depth of guilt and regret that surprised her. Elena, Damien said, his voice carrying across the distance between them. Rough with emotion, he made no attempt to hide. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I did not agree to forgive you, Elena said, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotion churning within her. I agreed only to hear whatever you have come to say. Damien nodded, accepting this boundary without complaint. That is more than I deserve, he said quietly. He glanced briefly toward Ivy, held securely in Elena's arms, and something shifted across his expression, a complicated mixture of longing and grief. This is Ivy, Elena said, her voice carrying a protective edge that left no room for misunderstanding. My daughter. Our daughter, Damien said softly, though he made no move to approach closer, respecting, at least in this moment, the careful distance Elena had established. She is my daughter, Elena corrected firmly. Whatever biological connection exists between you, Damien, you forfeited any claim to fatherhood the moment you cast us both out into the wilderness, believing lies over the truth of the woman you claim to love. Damien flinched visibly at the sharpness of her words, though he did not argue against them, his expression instead crumbling into open, unguarded regret. You are right, he said. I have no right to claim fatherhood, not after what I did. I came here today not to demand anything from you, Elena, but simply to tell you the truth, and to offer whatever apology might begin to address the wrong I committed against you. Cade, standing protectively beside Elena, watched this exchange with careful attention, ready to intervene should the conversation require it, but allowing Elena the space to navigate this difficult confrontation according to her own wishes. Then speak, Elena said. Tell me the truth you have come all this way to share. Damien took a steadying breath before continuing. Celine fabricated the entire accusation against you, he said. Out of jealousy, out of resentment, that I had chosen you as my mate, rather than continuing whatever relationship we had once shared. She lied about seeing you meet with a rival scout. In truth, it was Celine herself who had been meeting secretly with outside parties, and she used that guilt, twisted into an accusation against you, to protect herself while destroying the woman she saw as a rival. I suspected as much, Elena said quietly, though hearing the confirmation spoken aloud still carried a fresh sting of pain. What I do not understand, Damien, is how you allowed such flimsy evidence, presented by a woman with such obvious motive, to outweigh everything you knew of my character, everything we had built together as mates. Damien's expression filled with visible shame. I allowed fear and political pressure to override my own judgment, he admitted. The council pushed hard for immediate action, worried about appearing weak in the face of accusations of betrayal. I told myself I had no choice, that duty required swift punishment, regardless of my own doubts. But the truth is, Elena, I failed you. I failed to trust in what I knew of your heart, and I failed to protect you the way any true mate should have protected the woman he claimed to love. The confession, raw and unguarded, hung heavy in the air between them. Elena studied Damien's face carefully, searching for any hint of manipulation, any trace of the calculated performance Celine had once displayed so convincingly. She found none. What she saw instead was genuine, unguarded remorse. A man finally confronting the full weight of a decision that had cost him everything that had once mattered most to him. "What do you want from me, Damien?" Elena asked finally. "Why have you truly come here?" "I do not expect forgiveness," Damien said. "I do not even know if I deserve the chance to know my daughter, given everything I have done. But I needed you to know the truth, Elena. I needed you to know that Celine has been exposed before the full council, that justice is being served for the betrayal she committed against you. And I needed to see, with my own eyes, that you had survived, that you had found some measure of safety and happiness, despite everything I took from you." Elena felt tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, though she was not entirely certain whether they came from grief, from relief, or from some complicated combination of both. She glanced toward Cade, drawing strength from his steady, supportive presence beside her, before turning her attention back to Damien. "I have found safety," she said quietly. "I have found happiness, more genuine and complete than anything I ever experienced within your pack, even during our happiest moments together. I built that life here, within Ashran territory, with people who valued me for who I am, rather than the role I filled." Damien nodded slowly, accepting this truth without argument, though clearly the words carried their own painful weight. "I am glad," he said, and Elena heard genuine sincerity in his voice, despite the visible pain it cost him to speak such words. "You deserve that happiness, Elena. You always deserved far better than what I gave you." The conversation had reached a natural pause, both parties having spoken the truths they had carried into this difficult meeting, and Elena found herself uncertain what should come next, what resolution, if any, remained possible between them after everything that had transpired. The silence between Elena and Damien stretched on, heavy with everything that had been said and everything that still remained unspoken. Ivy stirred slightly in Elena's arms, waking from her nap, and her amber eyes blinked open, focusing with unusual clarity on the unfamiliar wolf standing at a careful distance before her. Damien's breath caught visibly at the sight of those striking amber eyes, so unlike his own, so clearly marked by whatever unusual heritage Ivy had inherited from the land of her birth. "She has your strength in her eyes," he said quietly, though his tone carried a note of wonder, rather than any claim of ownership. "She has her own strength," Elena corrected gently, though not unkindly. "Whatever gifts she carries, they are hers alone, shaped by everything that has happened since the night you cast us out." Damien absorbed this correction with quiet acceptance, understanding, perhaps for the first time with full clarity, exactly how much distance now existed between the family he had once imagined building with Elena and the reality of the life she had constructed without him. "I understand," he said. "I have no right to claim any part of her upbringing, Elena. I only hope, someday, if you are willing, that she might know the truth of her origins. Not necessarily know me as a father, but at least know that I was not always the man who failed her mother so completely." Elena considered this request carefully, weighing the genuine remorse she saw in Damien's expression against the deep and lasting harm his actions had caused. "Perhaps someday," she said finally, "when she is old enough to understand the full complexity of her history. But that decision will be Ivy's own to make, when the time comes, not something imposed upon her by either of us." "That seems fair," Damien said, nodding slowly. "More than fair, given everything I have taken from both of you already." Cade, who had remained quietly observant throughout this exchange, finally spoke, his tone measured but firm. "Damien," he said, "I understand the courage it took to make this journey, to face the truth of what you allowed to happen. But I want to be clear about something important. Elena and Ivy are under my protection now, fully and completely. Whatever role you hope to play in their lives moving forward will be entirely at Elena's discretion, and I will support whatever boundaries she chooses to establish." Damien met Cade's steady gaze directly, and something like genuine respect passed between the two alphas, an acknowledgement of shared understanding, despite the very different circumstances that had brought them to this moment. "I would expect nothing less," Damien said. "You have given Elena and my daughter something I failed to provide: safety, genuine partnership, unconditional support. I have no claim to challenge the protection you offer them." Elena watched this exchange with a complicated mixture of emotions, grateful for Cade's fierce protectiveness, while also recognizing, with quiet surprise, that Damien seemed genuinely willing to accept whatever limitations she chose to place on his involvement in their lives. It was not the reaction she might have expected from the Alpha, who had once so easily believed lies over the truth of her character, but perhaps, she realized, the weight of his failure had genuinely transformed something within him. "I have one final thing to offer," Damien said, reaching into a pouch at his side and withdrawing a small, sealed document. "This is a formal declaration, signed before my full council, acknowledging the truth of Celine's fabricated accusation, and formally clearing your name of any wrongdoing. Whatever you choose to do with this information, whether you wish to return to visit your old pack someday, or simply wish to know that the record has been corrected, the truth now stands clearly documented." Elena accepted the document carefully, though she made no immediate move to open it, the weight of what it represented settling heavily within her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This means more than you likely realize. Having my name cleared, having the truth finally acknowledged." "It is the least I could offer," Damien said, "though I know it does not undo the harm already caused." The conversation had reached its natural conclusion, both parties having said what needed to be said, and Damien, seeming to understand this, took a respectful step back. "I will not overstay my welcome in your territory," he said, glancing toward Cade, with clear acknowledgement of the delicate diplomatic nature of his visit. "Thank you for allowing me the chance to speak, and for the safety and happiness you have given Elena and our daughter." "Take care, Damien," Elena said, and found, to her own quiet surprise, that she meant the words genuinely, without any lingering bitterness clouding their sincerity. Whatever pain his actions had caused, she recognized in this moment that clinging to anger would serve no purpose beyond weighing down the new life she had built for herself and her daughter. As Damien and his small envoy began their careful retreat from Ashran territory, Elena remained standing beside Cade, watching the wolves disappear back into the mountain passes from which they had emerged. She felt lighter somehow, as if a burden she had carried unknowingly for many months had finally been set down, replaced by a quiet sense of closure she had not realized she needed until this very moment. "Are you all right?" Cade asked softly, once the envoy had fully disappeared from view. "I am," Elena said, and found that she meant it completely. "I think I needed that conversation more than I realized. Not to reconcile with him, not to reclaim any part of what we once had together, but simply to hear the truth spoken aloud. To know that justice had finally been served against the one who truly caused this harm." Cade wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders, drawing her close against his side as they turned to walk back toward the stronghold together, Ivy settling comfortably against Elena's chest, already drifting back toward sleep despite the eventful morning. "You handled that with remarkable strength," Cade said. "I am proud of you, Elena, proud of the woman you have become, through everything you have endured." "I could not have found that strength without you," Elena admitted, leaning into his supportive embrace as they walked. "Without the safety and belonging you offered me from the very first moment you found me on that mountainside. You carried the strength within yourself all along," Cade said gently. "I simply gave you the space and safety to discover it fully." As they made their way back through the stronghold's gates, Elena felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, different from anything she had experienced since the night of her exile so many months before. The past had finally been addressed, the truth finally acknowledged and documented, and whatever complicated history remained between herself and Damien had been resolved as fully as it could be, given everything that had transpired. Ahead of her now stretched only the future, a future built on genuine love, mutual respect, and the unwavering support of a partner who had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. Whatever challenges still lay ahead, Elena felt ready, for the first time in longer than she could remember, to face them with confidence and hope rather than fear. Several months passed following Damien's visit, and the Ashran stronghold settled back into its familiar, peaceful rhythms. Word of the resolved conflict spread quietly through the mountain territories, and though occasional curiosity brought distant visitors, seeking to catch a glimpse of the wolf woman who had found refuge among dragons, the clan's protective boundaries ensured that Elena and Ivy remained safe and undisturbed within their new home. Elena had thrown herself fully into clan life during these months, her role within the healing quarters expanding steadily as her skills and knowledge continued to grow under Mira's careful guidance. She had also taken on a more formal role in advising Cade on matters of clan governance, her unique perspective as someone who had witnessed both the failures of rigid wolf hierarchy and the strengths of the Ashran clan's more flexible approach, proving invaluable in shaping policies that honored both structure and individual purpose. Ivy, now approaching her first year of life, had grown into a bright, curious child whose unusual heritage continued to reveal itself in small but unmistakable ways. She showed an early aptitude for sensing emotion and intention in those around her, an ability Mira suggested might eventually develop into genuine healing gifts as she grew older. She also displayed, even at her young age, a fierce independence and determination that reminded Elena, with quiet pride, of both her own resilience and the steady strength Cade demonstrated in his leadership. The formal mate bonding ceremony between Elena and Cade had taken place several weeks after Damien's departure, a joyous celebration attended by the entire clan, filled with music, laughter, and genuine warmth that stood in stark contrast to the cold, calculated judgment Elena had experienced within her old pack's great hall so many months before. Elena had worn a simple dress woven with threads that caught the light like scattered starlight, and as Cade formally claimed her as his mate before the assembled clan, she felt, with complete and unwavering certainty, that she had finally found the true home and family she had always deserved. On a particularly clear evening, several months after the ceremony, Elena stood once again at the edge of the stronghold's outer wall, the same spot where she and Cade had first acknowledged the depth of their growing feelings for one another so many months before. Ivy toddled unsteadily nearby, chasing after a small, colorful insect that had caught her curious attention, while Cade watched with quiet amusement, ready to catch her should her uncertain steps lead to a stumble. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been?" Cade asked, coming to stand beside Elena, as they both watched their daughter's determined exploration. "If I had not found you that night on the mountainside." Elena considered the question thoughtfully, her mind drifting back briefly to that terrible, desperate night, to the cold ground, and the exhaustion that had nearly claimed both her life and Ivy's before it had truly begun. "I try not to dwell too much on what might have been," she said finally. "But yes, sometimes I think about it, about how close I came to losing everything, and how fortunate I am that fate, or perhaps something even greater, led you to find me when you did." "I have thought about it as well," Cade admitted, "about how differently my own life might have continued had I not chosen to investigate that faint scent of distress carried on the mountain wind that night. I had grown so accustomed to solitude, to keeping myself apart from personal attachments, that I nearly convinced myself the risk of involvement was not worth taking." "What changed your mind?" Elena asked, genuinely curious, despite having heard fragments of this story before. "Something told me I could not simply walk away," Cade said. "Some instinct deeper than caution, deeper than the careful distance I had maintained for so many years. I do not fully understand it myself, even now, but I have never once regretted the choice I made that night." Elena reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his with the easy familiarity of a bond built on genuine trust and shared experience. "Neither have I," she said softly. "Whatever pain led me to that mountainside, whatever betrayal and cruelty forced me into exile, I would endure it all again, if it meant arriving, ultimately, at this life we have built together." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching Ivy continue her energetic pursuit of the elusive insect, her laughter carrying clearly through the evening air, bright and unguarded, and full of the simple joy that came from growing up secure in the knowledge that she was deeply loved. "I received word today," Cade said eventually, his tone carrying a note of quiet satisfaction, "that Celine has been formally exiled from Damien's pack, her punishment for the fabricated accusation and the harm it caused. Damien has also begun implementing changes to how his council handles accusations of betrayal, requiring far more substantial evidence before any judgment can be rendered." "That is good to hear," Elena said, and found that she meant it sincerely, without any trace of lingering bitterness. "Perhaps some good has come from everything that happened, if it means other wolves within that pack will be protected from the kind of hasty, poorly evidenced judgment that nearly cost me everything." "You have a remarkably generous heart," Kate observed, to find room for such grace after everything you endured. I learned that grace from watching you, Elena said, turning to meet his gaze directly. From the moment you found me, offering help without expectation of anything in return, you showed me that strength and kindness are not opposing forces, but rather two halves of the same whole. I could not have found my way to healing, to genuine happiness, without that example. Cade pulled her close, pressing a gentle kiss against her forehead as Ivy, having finally abandoned her pursuit of the insect, toddled over to wrap her small arms around both their legs, demanding to be included in whatever quiet moment her parents were sharing. Cade lifted her easily, settling her against his hip, and the three of them stood together at the edge of the wall, watching the sun complete its slow descent behind the mountain peaks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Whatever challenges the future still holds, Elena said softly, watching her daughter's contented face as she nestled against Cade's shoulder. I know now that we will face them together, as a true family, built on honesty and genuine partnership rather than fear or obligation. Always together, Cade agreed, his voice carrying the same quiet, unwavering conviction that had first drawn Elena to trust him so many months ago, when her entire world had seemed to be collapsing around her. You and Ivy are my family now, Elena. Nothing will ever change that. As the last light of the setting sun faded into the deepening twilight, and the first stars began to emerge across the vast mountain sky, Elena felt a profound and settled peace fill her heart, complete in a way she had once believed impossible after the devastating betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her completely. She had walked through exile, through grief, through the terrifying uncertainty of starting a new life, alone in unfamiliar territory, and had emerged not just surviving, but genuinely thriving, surrounded by love, purpose, and the unshakable strength she had discovered within herself along the way. The mountains stood silent and eternal around them, ancient guardians of the home Elena had found within their protective embrace, and as she watched her small family settle into the quiet comfort of the evening, she knew, with complete and unwavering certainty, that whatever the future held, she would face it with courage, with love, and with the steady, unbreakable support of the family she had built from the ashes of everything she had once believed lost forever.